Hello, I'm Cheryl and welcome to my sewing room. This is the 8th video in making the Beginners Sampler Quilt. Now I'm going to take you through all the steps from beginning to end. There will be 12 blocks in all. So if you're just getting started and you haven't seen all of the other videos, click on the playlist at the very end of the video that lists all of the videos that have been released to date. Now the playlist is at the very top right hand corner in the last few seconds of the video. Okay, so let's take a look at the 8th block, which is called Churn Dash. Okay, now this block has one 6.5 inch square in the very center. Then there's 4 3.5 inch squares, and then you've got 8 half square triangles. Okay, all right, so let's take you through the cutting instructions. Okay, now all of the blocks, the finished size is 12.5 inches square on all of them. Now remember, if you haven't watched the first video, I'm using 3 different fabrics, but you can use scraps or other things to create this. You don't have to just stick with 3 fabrics. You can use multiple fabrics. All right, so out of my fabric B, cut one 6.5 inch square, 4 3.5 inch squares, 4 4.5 inch squares, and out of fabric C, 4 4.5 inch squares. Now, if you're just getting started and you don't know how to cut out quilt fabric, watch my video, Tips for Cutting Quilt Fabric, and I take you through all the steps to cut it out efficiently. You don't want to have to sit there and cut one little square out at a time. This is the block layout, and the letters in there represent the fabric. That's where it's to be placed. So this is my fabric B, and then over here you see where the fabric C is supposed to be placed. Okay, so let's get started. Take all of your fabric C blocks that are 4.5 inches square, and you're going to draw a line down the center. So place your ruler from corner to corner, and either with a pencil or a fabric marker, draw a line. Now you're going to draw 2 more lines on each side of the center line, 1/4 inch away. So take your 1/4 inch line and place it on the center line and draw a line. Then go to the other side, place your 1/4 inch line on this center line and draw your 3rd line. Okay, now the 2 outer lines are going to be your stitch lines. This is where you'll stitch. Now take all of your 4 fabric C squares and your 4 fabric B squares that are 4.5 inches in size, pair them up with a C and a B together, bringing right sides together like that. Then stitch here on that outer line on this side and this outer line there. Stitch all 4 of these because you're creating 4. All right, now you're going to cut them in half. So place your ruler on the center line, okay, and with your rotary cutter, go ahead and cut your blocks in half. You're going to cut all 4 in half. Okay, so now here are your halves. Okay, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to take each 2 halves and you're going to turn 4 of them with the dark side up and 4 with the light side up. Okay, and you're going to press the seams with your iron. Whenever you hear me say press, I mean with your iron. Okay, then in this pile over here where the dark side is up, you're going to press it on top, pushing this seam towards the dark side. And do all 4 like that. Then on this one, you're going to press again, open it up, press on the top, pushing this side, the yellow, towards the yellow or the light side, okay? You'll have 4 like this. All right, so now that you've got all your pressing done on your blocks, you're going to square your blocks. Now, right now, this square is now down to about 4 inches, okay? We want to bring it down to size 3.5. So place your diagonal line on your ruler, place it right on this seam. Now, you're going to want to make sure you have a little bit of fabric hanging out here on this side and this side. And then here's my 3.5-inch line there and here. You're going to also want some fabric hanging out beyond that 3.5-inch line. So once you've got everything lined up, you're going to cut just 2 sides. Okay, so cut here, and then you're going to cut right in here. Okay, now you're going to turn the block. Now here are my 2 previously cut sides. Place your 3.5-inch line on the ruler here and here on those raw edges. Also make sure that your diagonal line on the ruler is on that seam. So get it all lined up. Once you've got it all lined up, then cut the last 2 sides. Okay? Now you're going to do this on all 8 of your half square triangles, all 8. Okay, so now take all of your fabrics and lay it out in this pattern. Place your large 6.5-inch square there. Then take your 4 3.5-inch squares of fabric B and place one on each corner, like this. And one here, and then the last one over here. All right, so right now it should look like this. Now take all of your half square triangles and put all of your half square triangles with the seam pressed towards the dark side in one pile, and in the other pile have the seams pressed towards the light side in another pile. And you're going to pair them up. All right, so take one of each, okay, and lay that out. Let me get a hold of it here. There we go. And place it like that and like that. Okay? Take your next 2, one of each, and lay it out like this. Okay? And then take the next 2, one of each, and then your last 2. Now, the reason why we took one of each is this way we make sure we're going to be able to match those seams up when we stitch it together, because you always want to make sure that the seams are going in opposite direction, because your block will lay very flat and it won't get lopsided. Okay, so now when you're making a block that has this many pieces in it, the best way to start stitching all the pieces together is to start in the middle row. Okay, so we're going to build the middle row first. First, we're going to stitch these 2 pieces together. So bring one on top of the other, pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Then go over here to this side, place this one on top, pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Okay, now you're going to press them. So have both blocks with the solid square up. Your half square triangle will be on the bottom. Okay, so with your iron you're going to press your seam. Okay, then open it up, pressing on the top, pushing this seam towards the solid square, okay? And do the same thing with this one. Press it towards the solid square on top. Now, lay your blocks back out like this, okay? Now, we're still working on this row. So now, bring this one on top, line up your edges here, and pin and stitch along here. Then go over here, lay this one on top, line up your edges, pin and stitch 1/4 inch, okay? Now, let's go through the pressing. You've just stitched them all. So, press on the back side of the block. On these two seams you just stitch. Now, when you go to press on the top side, you're going to want your seams here and here to go towards the center of the block. So what I usually do is I keep the center of the block lifted and I begin to push with my iron against that seam, forcing it to go towards the center of the block, okay? Pressing on the top side, then just switch it and do the same thing. Press on the top, pushing this seam towards the center of the block. Okay, so now you have your center row put together, okay? Now we're going to work on the last 2 rows. So here's how you're going to go about that. Take these 2 blocks and line up your edges, pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Then take these 2 blocks, line up your edges. Now on these 2, you have to match up this corner here because these are 2 half square triangles. So make sure that the seam on the top and the bottom, they're going in opposite directions. Place a pin to hold that seam so it doesn't shift while you're sewing, okay? And then stitch 1/4 inch. Okay, now take your row and now we're going to take this side and lay it on top of this side, okay? So lay them on top, line up this raw edge here with each other and pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Okay, so now you have your row stitched together. This is what it should look like. Now on the pressing, I'm going to turn it over. When you press, you want the 2 outer seams to go away from the center. Away from the center. The middle seam, it can go either direction, it doesn't matter. So first press all your seams on the back side, all of them. Then as you press them on the 2 end seams, you're going to push this seam away from the block and press on top. And the same thing on this other seam, pushing that seam away from the center and press on that top. This seam in the middle can go either direction. Okay, so now you've got this row done. You're going to repeat all of those steps for the last row. Lay this one on top, pin and stitch. Lay this one on top, pin and stitch. Then open them up and then take this side and place it on top of this side and pin and stitch in the center. The pressing, same way as you did this row here. Okay, so now, let me get all this out of the way. Now, you want to press. So you want to stitch your last 2 rows together. So, you want to take this row and bring it on top. And take this row and bring it on top. Okay? Pin and stitch 1/4 inch. And then come over here, pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Now, before you stitch, make sure you match the seams here and here, making sure they go in opposite directions. So place a pin there to secure it, and place a pin here to secure it so it doesn't shift while you're stitching. And then of course pin this one down, but there's no seam to match here, okay? Finish pinning across. Do that same thing on this row here, matching your seams. Stitch 1/4 inch on both of the rows, okay? And then open it up. And now you're going to do your final pressing. You're going to press on top, pushing this seam out and away from the center of the block, and make sure this seam all goes in that one direction, that it's not split and going half one way and half the other. Pressing on top, and do the same thing on this block. I'm going to turn it. Pressing this seam out away from the center of the block. Okay? All right, and there you go. You have the churn dash. I really like this block. I know there were a lot of pieces, but I really felt that if you've been following me for a while, you're ready for this block. Okay, just take your time, watch the video a couple of times, and put it on pause and do one little step at a time. Okay? All right, now let's take a look at the next one. I really like this one. This is called geometric square. And I'm going to show you a technique to put this together. It's not difficult, but of course, once you know how, it won't be difficult at all. It's actually a pretty easy process. And then we've just got some simple rectangles and squares surrounding the square in the middle. Okay, well, I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope you take this project on. You will really learn a lot. And don't forget to click on the playlist at the end of the video to list all of the blocks created so far. Now, to keep informed on all my future videos, click on subscribe. There's one in the upper left-hand corner. It's a round picture of me floating around towards the very end of the video. And then throughout the video, there's one in the lower right-hand corner. It's red and it does say subscribe. Click on either one of those and YouTube will prompt you for your email address. Enter that information, and the next time I have a new video, YouTube sends you an email with a big button in the center. Click on that button and it takes you directly to my latest video. I'm Cheryl. I'm really glad you came to my sewing room. I'll see you next time, and happy sewing.